I've prepared my list of the 5 best cases of 2020, and I've had to edit that list because the NZXT H1, as you may know, is currently not available, well, certainly not in the UK anyway. They've had a problem with the PCI Express riser cable. Apparently 10 or so cases have had a problem. They've shorted or caught fire or something terrible. So revised parts are being sent out, which means I'm not going to be using my H1 in the near future. So the H1, which ought to be on the list, I have taken off, and in its place, I'm going to start my list with number 5, which is the Corsair 4000D Airflow. I'm actually really glad that Corsair's made the list, because over the past couple of years I've reviewed a number of Corsairs that have been, they've been okay but not great, or problematic, or whatever, somewhat too expensive. The 4000D ticks many boxes, not least because there's actually 3 versions. You can have a regular 4000D with a closed front, you can have the 4000D Airflow, which is a kind of mesh type panel, or you can have the RGB variant. As we know, Corsair sells a huge number of fans, including a great many RGB models. That one comes with some RGB fans pre-installed. The 4000D core chassis is the same in each instance. The regular model and the Airflow model, they're the same price. I was very glad I got the 4000D Airflow to review. It comes with a pair of 120mm fans. You can, if you want, put a 360 radiator at the front. You can put a 240mm or 280mm radiator in the roof. Cable management is perfectly okay, although there aren't cable management grommets. It has good airflow, certainly in the Airflow variant that we had. And one of my personal bugbears with many cases is you need a few more millimeters space at the top in order to get the EPS cables in place and to put your cooler in above the memory and such like. This case has sufficient space, and it costs £80. It's not the most brilliant case on the planet, but it's pretty blooming good, and that pleases me. So Corsair 4000D Airflow comes in at number 5. At number 4, we have the Be Quiet Pure Bass 500DX. This case was £90 at launch. It appears to have gone up to £100 today. In many respects, it's quite a conventional case, although the fact it's a Be Quiet with a hint of RGB, ARGB if we're being pedantic. So £100 is relatively expensive as cases go. It's 80x, but it comes with 3 140mm Pure Wings 2 fans. Those fans are worth a reasonable amount of money. You have to factor that into the asking price. You can put a 360mm radiator in the front, a 240mm radiator in the roof. I have to say this case is a bit tight for space during the build, and if you decide to remove, for example, a drive cage, you'll suddenly find you have a hole appearing where you don't necessarily want one. However, the case itself is good. Fully filtered, it's got decent cooling, and you've got some ARGB. Case number 3 on the list is the Cooler Master Masterbox NR200P. This is a mini ITX chassis with a very long mouthful of a model code. So mini ITX, and the power supply is either SFX or SFXL, and depending on which power supply you have installed, i.e. whether it's a regular SFX or the longer SFXL, determines where the power supply caddy is installed, and that determines how much space you have in the upper part of the case. It's a small ITX chassis, but it's not tiny. It can accommodate proper cooling and a proper graphics card. Depending on how you configure the NR200P, you have the intake at the bottom, and you might have intake or exhaust at the side, and then you put fans in the roof. So the top is certainly exhausting, the side might be intake, might be exhaust. In the side you can put a 240mm or a 280mm radiator, which is pretty awesome for a mini ITX system. It's the full-length graphics card in the floor of the case that really wowed me, because you could potentially use the fans on the graphics card as intake fans, or you might even de-shroud your graphics card, put fans in the case and use them to cool the graphics card directly. It's a small, compact and actually very straightforward case that gives you heaps of options. Moving up the chart further to number 2, we have a real budget case. This is the Phanteks Eclipse P360A, which costs £64. £64, that's absolutely nothing. This is a compact ATX chassis, however it has a decent amount of space inside. It's that weird TARDIS thing that Phanteks seems to do. It's supplied with a pair of RGB fans, and these are PWM fans. I said this in my review. I completely fail to understand how companies such as Phanteks can supply PWM fans, whereas many other companies supply voltage control fans. It's 2020, it's the end of 2020 for goodness sake. I'm sick and tired of seeing fans that aren't PWM. To my mind, everything should be PWM. The case is fully filtered, but the front panel doubles up both as a mesh panel and also as a filter. It flows air like a champ. Potentially on the downside, if you're to crank up your fan speed, I can see this case could get noisy because basically you're next to all the components. Separating you from the hardware is almost nothing. On the other hand, if your system breathes well, you should be able to run your fans low and slow. By any measure, it's just an impressive case. The fact it's so blooming cheap, that really pleased me. And the winner, my case of the year, is the Fractal Design Meshify 2. It's really easy to sum up the Meshify 2. It's the Define 7 with a mesh front. The Define 7's a really good case. Over the past couple of years, Fractal's given the design of their cases something of a makeover. The new models look quite similar to recent models, but they are completely different inside. There is a load more space. You can basically install anything in this case, with the exception of a dual system. That's about the only thing that's off limits. You get 3 fans included, and you have options for all the drives you could possibly want, all the cooling you could possibly want. I know some smart alec's going to try and put 2 480mm rads or something in it, which is impossible, but anything that's sensible that you can imagine, you can do with the Fractal Design Meshify 2. Fractal is charging a very reasonable £129 for the Meshify 2. If you choose to add some accessories because you want just an insane number of drives in it, for example, it will cost you more. But the vast majority of people, the vast majority of enthusiasts will find that £129 purchase gives them everything they want. I was hugely impressed with the Fractal Design Meshify 2, to the extent I'm not quite clear what they're going to do next to top this case. I'm really looking forward to 2021 just to see what these manufacturers will do to beat what they did in 2020. I'm that pleased with how things have turned out. And that's it. That's my list of the 5 best cases of 2020.